Thank you, Graham. And in starting, I would like to acknowledge the Welcome to Country by Uncle Lewis, and to acknowledge that the land that we meet on is the land of the Kaurna people, always was, always will be, and we respect the cultural authority of Aboriginal leaders, past, present and emerging. I don't want to talk for too long because I want to hear from the conspicuous professional from Leeds, and I've heard his reputation precedes him, and so I've been looking forward to this for some time, and I'm very keen to hear particularly the positive focus that you, I believe, will be bringing to us. I'd like, though, just to briefly sketch some things that are going on in child protection, most of which will be quite familiar to you. We have been dealing for the last couple of years, really, but reaching a crescendo recently with the Nyland report release. We've been hearing that child protection in South Australia is in crisis, and while no one wants to be part of something that's in crisis, I think we have to accept that to a large degree that's true. And it's true because there are several features of what's occurring that none of us feel satisfied with, content with, feel that sufficiently good work is occurring. What crisis looks like for us is something like 50,000 notifications of some sort coming in to our CAL, something like 20,000 being screened in, and an escalating number of children being removed, and yet nonetheless not every investigation not every notification that's regarded as serious being able to be looked at. We're dealing in a world of finite resources, and naturally, in dealing with humans, errors of judgment or inability to accurately predict how people will behave. And yet, simultaneously, in a world where we ought not ever brook any risk for any child. So we're living in a world of complexity, and it will always be a complex area. And at the moment in South Australia, we are struggling in particular. We have around 200 children who are in commercial emergency care on any given night, because we don't have enough places, enough families for those children who we are removing from their homes to go to. Now, inevitably, when you're working at that end of child protection, it's pretty hard work. It's made more difficult by incessant media criticism, some of which naturally is valid and some of which is completely spurious and unfair. And we're dealing in a world where, as I say, with finite resources and the inevitability of errors of judgment dealing with human beings, that the people who are working at that end of the business are under enormous strain, enormous pressure. And there's a sense that there's always more coming down the line. And that feeling of being overwhelmed that I believe a lot of our frontline workers are experiencing, we need to pay attention to that. And we need to acknowledge it, and we need to support those people, because those people are the ones who are doing everything they can to support children. But we need to take one step back and understand what's really going on. And what's really going on is not going to be solved by an army of social workers intervening on individual notifications as if they were police reports. Because what we're really dealing with is that 1 in 4 children in South Australia by the age of 10 will have received a notification. 19% of 10-year-olds will have had at least one screened-in notification. That is one where the social workers who are taking the call regard that as sufficiently serious that they want to put it into our system. Now, that is a crisis in parenting. That is a crisis in family. Now, in saying that, I, as a social democrat, don't locate the responsibility exclusively and entirely on individuals. I think we're seeing a crisis in our society. And for me, what we're seeing is, although there are child protection notifications and child neglect and abuse that occurs across all of the social strata, what we're seeing is dislocation of whole sections of our community where the abuse and neglect is concentrated. And it's concentrated because families have been left behind. Because we're seeing a society where the rich continue to get richer and the poor are dropping out. And it's not just about being poor, it's about being workless. What we're seeing with the dramatic changes in our economy is that people have fallen out of the workforce and never got back in. So economic policy is social policy. Every piece of work that we do to employ people, to train people, to educate people is social policy, and it is in fact child protection work at its greatest extent. And my concern is that we make sure, particularly in this week, the Anti-Poverty Week, that we acknowledge the deep complexity that an enormous proportion, far too great a proportion of our society is living with, because it affects all of us, and therefore it's all our responsibilities. And as Education Minister, despite the move of child protection into a different department, which will occur very soon, education has an enormous role to play in helping children who are vulnerable every day, but also in preparing them to be successful in our economy and in our society. It's the same with health. Health has an enormous role to play because that health and education is where children are. And we must step up and make sure that we're playing the roles that we need to play as universal services, as services that touch children and families, that we're playing the role that we need to play. And a good example of that is the children's centres. These children's centres are tremendous. There'll be 47 very soon, there are 42 currently, where families are able to go with small children and not only get support for the kids being looked after for brief periods of time, but much more importantly, being plugged into allied health, being plugged into a larger and supportive system to help them be successful. But what I want to hear from Nigel is how we can really get into this early work, how we can really all take children seriously, all take families seriously, and all take seriously that it is not okay for whole parts of our population to not be succeeding and to be descending into dysfunctionality, and for children to be bearing the brunt of that. So the idea of a family-focused city excites me. And I'm not going to say any more because I want to hear about it. Thank you for being here today.